In the 2026 admissions landscape, we are seeing a 22% surge in applicant volume nationwide. This means that simply having 2 years of ICU experience is no longer a differentiator. It is the bare minimum. To secure a seat in a top-tier CRNA program today, you have to prove that you have already transitioned from a bedside task manager to a provider-level thinker. I call this the clinical audit. It is a process of evaluating your own practice to ensure you aren't just following protocols, but actually understanding the physiologic rationale behind every intervention. In this video, I am breaking down the 3 specific technical skills that separate the top 1% of applicants from the 99% who stay on the waitlist. If you master these 3 pillars, you aren't just another applicant, you are a doctoral level candidate in waiting. Stay tuned, because in a few minutes, I'm going to reveal the specific ventilator mode that catches almost every applicant off guard during the clinical interview gauntlet. Vasoactive pharmacology, beyond the titration. The first pillar of the top 1% is a master level understanding of vasoactive pharmacology. Most ICU nurses can titrate level fed to keep a MAP above 65, but a future nurse anesthetist understands the receptor level competition happening in the vasculature. You need to be able to explain exactly why you are adding vasopressin instead of just increasing your norepinephrine. Are you targeting the V1 receptors because of a catecholamine refractory state, or are you trying to mitigate the metabolic acidosis caused by high-dose alpha-1 agonism? When a panel asks you about your sickest patient, they don't want to hear that you kept them stable. They want to hear how you optimize their systemic vascular resistance while protecting their myocardial oxygen demand. If you can't explain the physiologic why behind your titration, you aren't ready for the head of the bed. We will be looking at how this pharmacological mastery ties into advanced mechanical support in just a moment, so keep that receptor math in your head. Hemodynamic precision and the provider pivot. To move into that elite 1%, you must move beyond basic vital signs and start managing the hemodynamic transition. This means moving from blood pressure to perfusion. A top-tier nurse anesthetist candidate can discuss the nuances of stroke volume variation and how it guides fluid resuscitation in a way that avoids pulmonary edema. You should be able to look at a CVP or a wedge pressure and tell a story about the patient's right heart function versus their left heart preload. Most applicants get stuck talking about fluids versus pressors, but the elite candidate talks about optimizing the Frank-Starling curve. This is the provider pivot. It is the moment you stop waiting for an order and start anticipating the clinical trajectory of the patient. If you're finding this data-driven approach helpful for your career strategy, make sure to subscribe to Wise CRNA. I'm here to help you audit the numbers so you can stop guessing and start building a high net worth future. Ventilatory mastery. The APRV challenge. The second technical skill is ventilatory mastery, and this is where most interviews are won or lost. In 2026, admissions panels expect you to know more than just A, C, or SIMV. You need to be an expert in advanced lung protective strategies, specifically APRV or airway pressure release ventilation. Can you explain the open lung concept? Do you understand the difference between T-high and T-low in terms of CO2 clearance versus alveolar recruitment? When a patient is failing conventional ventilation, a future nurse anesthetist understands how to manipulate the inspiratory to expiratory ratio to maximize mean airway pressure without causing barotrauma. This level of technical depth proves that you can handle the complex pulmonary physiology you will encounter in the operating room. Stick around, because after we cover the next skill, I'm going to show you the impella trap that catches even the most experienced CVICU nurses during their clinical checkoffs. The respiratory quotient and gas exchange. Deep mastery also requires you to understand the blood-gas bridge. You should be able to look at an ABG and immediately calculate the P to F ratio and the AA gradient to determine the severity of a shunt. The top 1% of nurse anesthetist applicants aren't just checking boxes on a flow sheet. They are calculating the dead space ventilation and adjusting the minute ventilation to compensate for metabolic derangements. If you are asked in an interview how you would manage a patient with severe ARDS, your answer needs to involve the physiologic rationale for PEEP and the impact of recruitment maneuvers on venous return. This isn't just vent settings, it is the physics of gas exchange, and it is the foundation of anesthesia practice. Advanced circulatory support, ECMO, and impella. The third and final pillar is mastery of advanced circulatory support. If you are working in a high acuity CV ICU, managing an Impella or an ECMO circuit is your golden ticket, but only if you actually understand the mechanics. This is the Impella trap I mentioned earlier. Most nurses know how to read the P level, but a top-tier nurse anesthetist can explain how the transvalvular flow affects the left ventricular pressure volume loop. If you are managing VAECMO, can you explain the Harlequin syndrome and how you monitor for differential cyanosis? You need to show the panel that you understand the unloading of the heart and the risks of increased afterload on the failing ventricle. I've mapped this entire technical progression into a high-density PDF for you. Make sure to download the free CRNA starter kit to get your 24-month clinical roadmap today. The Advanced Monitoring Audit. Beyond the machines themselves, you must master the data stream coming from them. This means being able to interpret an arterial line waveform to identify pulsus paradoxus or dampened waveforms that might lead to inaccurate clinical decisions. A nurse anesthetist doesn't just look at the number on the monitor, they look at the morphology of the wave. You should be able to discuss the dP over dt as a measure of myocardial contractility. In a clinical interview, being able to describe the dicrotic notch and what it tells you about aortic valve closure and systemic vascular resistance is an immediate indicator of elite clinical intelligence. This is the level of forensic detail that proves you are ready for doctoral level science. The interview gauntlet. Temperament and logic. Finally, we have to discuss the interview gauntlet itself. The technical skills we've covered are the what, but the how is your temperament under pressure. Admissions panels in 2026 are engineered high-pressure environments. They aren't just testing your knowledge, they are testing your stress response. They will push you until you don't know the answer, and in that moment, your ability to maintain a calm, analytical, think out loud process is what gets you the seat. The top 1% don't guess. They use a logical framework based on the physiology they have mastered. They say, I am not sure of the exact dosage, but based on the alpha-1 receptor profile, I would expect the following hemodynamic shift. That is the language of an anesthesia provider. The 24-month trajectory. Mastering these three pillars, vasoactive pharmacology, ventilatory mastery, and advanced circulatory support, is a 24-month process. It is not something you can cram for the week before your application is due. It requires a daily commitment to the clinical audit. Every time you walk into your ICU unit, you need to be asking the why behind every titration and every vent change. By the time you sit across from that admissions panel, this high-level clinical language should be your native tongue. You aren't just a nurse trying to get a degree, you are a future colleague showing them that you have already done the work to transition your mindset. If you play the long game and focus on these technical depths, the acceptance letter is just a formality. To see the full breakdown of how a $350,000 salary can actually feel broke, if you choose the wrong state, click the video on the screen now.